James, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective on things, and just to give trigger warning to folks that are out there. We may talk about some controversial things, David. That's okay, because some conversations may be a little bit difficult to have. But regardless, I do appreciate you taking time out of your Sunday to join me. So you just got back from D.C. from the Trump rally.
It was a pretty crazy week. It was, I was there. I might have been involved in some shenanigans, but I gotta say, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. It was probably the most historic thing that I've ever witnessed. It's just really exciting. It's hard to describe the feeling. I've been to rock concerts, heavy metal bands, things like that. Mm-hmm. Never experienced the intensity like I did there. It was like, if I had to compare it to something, maybe you're off to the side watching Spartans get ready for war, something like that. It was insane. But then everybody kind of rushed into the Capitol building, and then what do you do when you get there? They didn't really do anything, in my opinion, very criminal. Maybe some people, I
think some people definitely did some criminal
I think some
stuff.
people did, but
Like some folks were raiding offices and taking
and
devices.
breaking windows, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The majority, what I saw, were people just, trying to troll. People taking selfies, look what I did. I'm in the Capitol building. And that's basically...
Not too wise.
Not at all. Not at all. But that's the times we're living in. People nowadays, when they have their camera out, it's turned to themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just different generation that we're dealing with. When I grew up, you go somewhere, you take pictures of the scenery. Now it's all turn it on yourself.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's not something I'm into. but yeah, I gotta say, it was an exciting time. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. If they do it again, I'll go back. I was surprised to discover, once I got back to my car and ready to retire for the evening, I checked my phone, checked the text messages. I started reading what the media was saying about it. My friends, my parents were texting me saying that they're calling us domestic terrorists. And nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, there were some people that got out of line, and if you're part of the group and you have a couple of people get out of line, I kind of think it's on the group to correct that behavior. Mm-hmm. Nobody really did, though. And
it's kind of the same thing you saw with the quote-unquote peaceful protests as well, like this quote-unquote peaceful protest that happened in D.C.,
mm-hmm.
but over the summer, where you're essentially seeing, I'm trying to put it delicately and with a bit of logic, but you're seeing these fringe folk that are involved, right? Like mm-hmm. these agent provocateurs. Mm-hmm. So in particular in Minneapolis, before shit really started popping off, you were seeing these folks that were just dressed anonymously going around and smashing and breaking windows. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a, I forget the name of the study. I think it's actually called like the broken window effect or something like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
But if you see like looters or damage that's already done to a building or something, you're more inclined to then exacerbate the damage that's done. Folks aren't really too set on starting the damage, right? But once they see somebody else doing it, then they feel like, oh, it's okay. It's okay to do it.
That's because people, in my opinion, they behave like lemmings, and that sounds insulting. I realize that, but it's really true. If you want to see group behavior, if you get a group of people together and somebody gives a speech, all you need is maybe 4 or 5 people in that group to stand up and start applauding. The rest of the group will do it.
Yeah.
It's people just want to fit in. They don't want to. They don't want to stand out a lot of ways because they kind of fear being, outcast or just perceived to be an outcast.
Right.
And in my opinion, the media bosses know that and they exploit it. So when you have a democracy. This has been said before. This is not my own idea, but in a democracy, the electorate defaults power to the media bosses. Have you ever considered that?
I can see that. I like to view it as the media isn't news anymore. They're PR firms.
That's correct.
So that's essentially what they do. All they do is give narratives out as far as like, this is actually what's happening. We know that you may have seen this, but this is actually what's happening.
Right.
And now all of them seem to almost parrot each other. That there is no difference. Like they're not necessary. It's the illusion of competition, right? So like back in the day, they broke up Standard Oil, right? Because they were like, you have a monopoly.
Yeah.
So Standard's like, okay. So they broke up into like 7 companies. So now they still control all 7 companies, but they have the illusion of competition for the public. I feel that's not how our news organization started, obviously, but they've just been over time, just been bought up and bought up and bought up. And now that they're going to answer to whatever their clients want to do, right? That's their market, is whatever their advertisers want to do, and now they all seem to be on the same switch again, like this illusion of competition.
Right, like they're in conflict with each other, but they're still spiraling towards the same goal.
Yeah.
What is that goal? Depends on who you ask, I guess. Some people will tell you the goal is fascism. Others will tell you it's a communist globalism. I tend to think that there's all of those elements are involved. I wouldn't call it just fascism or just globalism, but I think all of those elements are certainly involved, and it's an interesting time. It's like you were just talking about how the corporate media and the social media, like Mark Zuckerberg, apparently he thinks he has more power than the president. For him to just ban our president from Facebook, that's a bold move on his part. Either he did it on his own or he was told to do that. But in either case, what is he thinking?
Sets a really bad precedent, and it doesn't matter if it's the orange asshole that's the president, or the sleepy sniffy old guy, the old man Winter that's the president, right? I think people get too hung up on some of these buzzwords, like the name Trump is a curse word now.
Right.
It triggers something in people, right? It puts them in a certain frame, almost like it's what was that, Manchurian Candidate, where they would say like a certain word or a phrase, and it sort of activates this program that has unconsciously been added to this person. I think that the mainstream news outlets kind of have done that, and they indoctrinate all of us with that, like since children, you know. So to your point, as far as like what is their aim in all this? Well, the aim to me is authoritarianism.
Yeah,
like that's the aim. That's the problem I have with folks that are so ideological to where they are. These are these fringe folks at these protests, right? I think they are sycophants in a certain manner, right? It does not matter to certain people what Trump represents to anybody else. To them, he is either this champion patriot or Hitler's, adopted son.
right.
Like there's nothing in between. It's like these are become avatars for what they represent, right? So if I'm an authoritarian and I can create two subclasses of people, I can now market to these people differently.
That's right.
And when you market to people differently, it's not just about like, well, what are they buying? Like you can market ideology to them. Like I think that's what the RNC has done to the religious right, and I think that's what the DNC does to the progressive left, is they know how to make you feel.
Yeah.
And they will market to you explicitly because of that. So again, if I'm on top of this newsroom and I see these demographics, and I have been working these angles over like 4 years now to further not necessarily divide but categorize, right? To find all these different nuances within this demographic to say, well, if then else, if then else, if then else, all the way down to something like what eventually will become, do you think the president should be allowed to have Twitter or not? Yes or no? And I think it's going towards yes if they approve so. So I think that's a dangerous route. Trump's rhetoric to me is a double-edged sword because he's a buffoon, yet I really like that we have a president, or had a president, that was politically incorrect. That is a really, really good thing in my mind, in my opinion, because as far as getting away from how we perceive politicians as these orators, right? For like Obama, greatest orator that we've had as a president I've ever seen. Kennedy was pretty good, but
Clinton was as well. I don't like the guy. In fact, I kind of think he should be locked up. But
I think he should be more than that. I think he should probably
I wasn't going to say that.
be burning in hell.
But
Not a fan of the Clintons on this show, sir.
I'm not a fan of Clinton, but he is a guy who can. He has the gift of gab. You can fly him in somewhere and say you're giving a speech to this audience. The subject is this, and he doesn't need a speech writer. He can go out there and just on the fly give a speech for like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Others would say he's a good bullshitter. Maybe.
It's admirable. Like even whenever like you see like somebody who's an incredibly talented liar, sometimes we call them actors, right?
Yes.
But we admire those people because again they make us feel something, right? So I think it's that the way they're able to sort of like punch through the veil and like hit us in our empathetic zones just in the right way.
All right.
Then that's how like you get people to be like, I like him. He's a good politician. He's good. It's like, well, I mean, maybe I don't think there are any. Like personally,
Well,
like I think that's kind of the like in order to work in that industry, you got to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
You got to have some blood on your collar. It
Plus,
seems.
it seems like you have to just have an innate sense of a selfishness, a desire to kind of make it to the top of the hill and put everyone else behind you. And that takes a certain kind of person, a lack of empathy.
Yeah, we call them psychopaths.
No, it's sociopaths. Yeah. So the problem becomes, is everyone in politics a sociopath, or do they just have sociopathic tendencies? I think that's likely the case. I also think that if you are a successful politician, it's probably because you can be blackmailed. You're susceptible to being blackmailed because of your criminal behavior or your criminal tendencies. And if we have a government full of politicians who are like that, we have problems. But again, that goes back to my original point, which you expanded on very well, which is the media bosses. We default power to the media bosses, because when you take a politician, any politician, Republican, Democrat, independent, whatever, it's the media bosses who shape that person's image in your mind. So a honest person can be portrayed as dishonest and racist, or whatever buzzword they want to use. They can be portrayed that way in the media, and if they're portrayed that way, the electorate believes it. They just do, and it's not because most people are unintelligent. I don't believe that at all. I think most Americans are pretty intelligent. The problem is, you don't have time to dig through all this. People go to work every day, all day long. When you get off work, you want to have dinner with your family and go to bed. You might flip on the evening news and, catch it for an hour. Most people just assume that the news are telling you the truth. It's not because, like I said, it's not because they're unintelligent or they're gullible. It's because they have no reason to believe that the news would have any reason to lie to them. For example, I'm not so much into sports. I admire sports, but I'm not into it.
Right.
So if I turn on the news tonight and I catch the sports section and they're talking about, I don't know, maybe a running back is like at the top of his game and he's the best running back there is, I have no reason to believe that newscaster would be lying about that, because why would they?
Right.
And unless you take a specific interest in that sport, you're just going to assume that they're telling the truth. And that's where I think that's where most people are. They're aware of a lot of political issues, but they don't have time to dig deep into it.
Right. Aside from that, whenever you do start, digging into something to try to find truth and form your worldview, it's not a comfortable journey a lot of times, and it takes a long time for people to get comfortable with who they are, what they believe in, what, they're, especially like what is going on in the world currently, because nobody wants to feel like they're so out of touch that they can't connect with their fellow human beings. That's on right. Current events or anything. Also goes to your point about where you talk about with conformity, another famous psychological experiment was whenever they would have, I think it was a group of 5 people, and they would have 4 of them. They were asked them basic math questions, right? And 4 of them they had planted to give the incorrect responses. And the 5th person, even whenever they knew what the correct responses were, they had a tendency to just agree with the rest of them.
Right.
2 + 2 = 5.
I think most people are like that. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be.
Well, at least it's a certain type of vulnerability with it, right? When that's in the animal world. If you don't conform, you get eaten. So there's a part of us that's wired like that because we are beast-like,
Humans are animals.
Yeah.
And for people to believe that that humans are such an advanced animal, that animal behavior ends with humans, I don't believe that. It does in certain instances, but
Right.
we do have behavior, and that goes back to what I was saying about people behaving like lemmings.
Precisely.
And I'm one of the people that kind of I go against the current. Having said that, I'm still susceptible to it. If I were to walk outside and there were a group of people right now and they're all looking up into the sky, looking up, I would stop and be like, "What are you looking at?" And I would start looking. Is there a drone? Is it a UFO? What? And it could just be a simple social experiment, But it goes back to what I was saying. The media bosses, they understand that. They figured that out a long time ago.
Yeah.
So they realize that that all they have to do is exploit that that sense of people's wanting to fit in, and once you do that, you can lead people anywhere. That's why we have so many insane policies, insane viewpoints right now that are mainstream. I don't know.
Well, like one of the ones that worries me that they've been calling racial sensitivity, but it's the critical race theory. But they do this game with words where they'll say like, well, it's actually this. It's like it's not actually that. You're using different words in an ad hoc manner in order to connect again on an empathetic level with the people you want to support it, right? So like they do this wordplay, and you look at like critical race theory, and it's like, this is a supremacist ideology.
That's right.
That's packed in here. 100% hard pass from me on any type of supremacist ideology based on qualities that you had no say-so in. Nobody got to choose what pussy they fell out of and where they landed when they were born.
Right.
Nobody did. You shouldn't make laws that are based on these things, let alone especially ones that involve some sort of hierarchical system like supremacist ideology, where you start putting people's value into like how you were born. Like and like, don't get me wrong, I am left of center on certain things with, for instance, like reparations. I think that American descendants of slavery, not black Americans, because not all black Americans are American descendants of slavery, and not all American descendants of slavery are black Americans. You have many American descendants of slavery. I think that businesses that were profitable and maintained through the Confederacy, that were a part of the Confederacy and supported this, whether that's the DNC oligarchs themselves or any of these other businesses, reparations should come from dismantling those companies and then using those funds to give back to those communities and those specific families that are American descendants of slavery. That's how it should be done. It should not be done with taxpayer money, I do not believe. I do not believe it should be done with that at all. I think it should be done with these companies that profited through and from the Confederacy existing, from the idea of people as property, as a market economy, which is an evil ideology in itself, that people are property. People are not a commodity. From being born, you have this gift of having innate value in yourself. Like, just from existing, you have value in that. Whenever you start saying that, well, yeah, but see, your ancestors came from this part of the world, and you have these type of genomes in your DNA. Therefore, these rules apply to you and not to your neighbor. That is not freedom. That's not America. That is something altogether new and scary. That is authoritarian, essentially.
Right. And in the 60s, well, prior to the 60s, prior to the civil rights era, it was the black community that was, downtrodden and portrayed in a bad light.
Right.
Currently, it's it's white males who are being portrayed in a bad light. Not always, of course, but just the fact that people would put those two words together, white male, as if that's an insult. It's not an insult. It's just what you happen to be if you're a white male.
I actually am not a white male, but I identify as one very convincingly. That's why I look like this.
Is that right?
That's what that is.
What are you really?
I can't say on this show.
I see. Okay.
But no, you're not wrong though. You know what I mean? Like these are again these are marketing campaigns. So if you look at how, like, say the Jim Crow era South worked ideological marketing campaigns, like they had all of these pamphlets that talked about Black Americans being savages, right? And they went through all of this balderdash, like phrenology and barbarism, like every culture, every tribe, every race, every ethnicity that is on Earth has barbarism in their past. It's a human characteristic. It's
so is the in a lot of ways racial supremacy is a human characteristic for people who are
homogenous.
Yes, they don't. A lot of times they don't feel comfortable expanding outside their own community, so they just kind of see things in a racially supremacist way. That doesn't mean always white supremacist. It's just something that happens in nature. Every single race that I can think of has their own racial supremacist group. They have their own organized crime groups. You look at Yakuza. A white male's not going to be able to infiltrate that because it's,
unless you're Tom Cruise,
Oh yeah, he can do anything. He was the last samurai.
He was
the last one. Amazing. So
they brought in a white guy. They're just like, that's it. Our culture's ruined.
Yeah,
they're going to steal
just
it.
End it there. And it's Tom Cruise. The guy saw it off. He's like 5'4". Just call it there. So, but we kind of kept it going there.
Yeah, but no, you're talking about how some folks are isolationists even when it comes to their biology as well. Like, I mean, that's essentially what it is, where these folks are supremacists and they're segregationists as well, And those are separate ideas altogether. A lot of and again, it goes back to like cheapening words, but whenever you just sort of say like racist with like everything, it's like, okay, what are we talking about? Like, exactly. Good job, bonkers.
Isn't it interesting how a lot of the racial supremacist groups come out of ideologies that are supposed to be egalitarian?
Yeah.
They claim that they want equality for everyone, and yet they stick their fists in the air and say this is a safe space away from whomever, white supremacy or whatever.
Well, that's kind of one of the things about Marxism that I dislike, is this notion of like utopia, yet we need to look at all of the races separately and judge each accordingly, to their abilities, right? Based on everyone's needs. There's a lot with Marxism that is, aside from its susceptibility to authoritarianism, there's a lot with it that is just a poisonous ideology to begin with.
Absolutely. The communists of Eastern Europe murdered more people than the Third Reich ever did. They murdered their own people, including the best and brightest. The fact that most Americans are unaware of this is alarming.
Ideological subversion happened in the 20th century.
That's correct.
So you have all these institutions that were talking about the horrors of fascism, and that you sort of just overlook the millions and millions and tens of millions of people that died from underneath Marxist or Maoist regimes that came in, again, under the guise of, we need to make the world a better place for everyone.
Right. And I mean, Marxism, in my view, is and I would debate this with anyone. Marxism, just from the onset, is a fallacy, because Marxism, communism, it claims that everyone's equal and we all kind of put into the same pot and distribute the money or resources equally. But at the very onset, money is not going to redistribute itself. You need administrators to send that out. Right then, it is defeated itself. The concept has, because you have everyone equal except for this small group of people who are entrusted with distributing this.
Yeah, you just change out the bourgeoisie for another.
That's correct.
The shadow bourgeoisie becomes the new bourgeoisie. You get rid of the previous one.
And you were talking about critical race theory and the basically their use of words, how they the double speak, to borrow from Orwell. Double speak. They have words that mean one thing, and yet they use it as another method. For example, they could say, "We're here to fight racism," except they want their own safe space away from other races because of whatever reason. That's a fallacy in itself.
Yeah, don't you? I remember growing up and seeing pictures from before the civil rights era where it was like they had separate water fountains for people and separate bathrooms for people. It's like, that's so awful, man. What? That was one of my big hang-ups with whenever a few years ago when it was taboo. It's like with the trans bathrooms. It's like, why don't you just go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Why do we need legislation and all this talk about we need to talk about this bathroom stuff that's going on? It's like, if somebody's doing something nefarious in the bathroom or they're not supposed to be in that bathroom, folks are gonna tell about it. It's like they will be quite vocal about it. I've had trans coworkers before that they're not biologically male, but they were still going to the men's room. Who fucking cares, man?
Very few people care.
Dude, if you need to poop, go poop.
I mean, the thing is it's the media that's making issues out of this when most people are just like, you want to go to the bathroom? Go to the bathroom. Well, who cares?
Well, and here's an interesting thing with that as well, with the, as far as in regards to the media, it then takes these folks that are the would-be target of this marginalization, right? And then it hits them in that empathetic part of them where they're just like why are they attacking me? Like I thought we were past this. Why is this going on? It's like, well, you're not necessarily being attacked. You're being told that you're under threat. So if you're not able to sort of look past that and see what's the game that's being played that they're marketing to me, right? Then you're more susceptible again to be manipulated into reactionary methods rather than responsive methods, right? So when you react to something, you're not really thinking logically. If you're having Thanksgiving dinner with everybody you've ever loved, and a ninja kicks in the window and punches the oldest, most fragile person at the table, no one's going to go, now, wait, hang on, sir. Wait a second. Who are you? You broke the window. No, calm down. No, everyone's going to pounce on that person and beat them. You know what I mean? That's a reactive response. So whenever you're reacting emotionally to this data that they're feeding you, then you're very susceptible to be manipulated.
Yes.
What you want to do is you want to respond to something. When you respond to something, you can take a breath, think about it for a second, and it's a game of chess, right? Whenever somebody lays down their piece, you don't want to immediately just be like well, and like move something hastily. No, take a moment. There's a problem, right? So you have to think about how to address the problem. And 9 times out of 10, if not more, I would say a reactionary solution is more damning to their cause than what they would want it to be.
Well said. I would totally agree with that. Also, I think a lot of what's happened in the 20th century is this view of victimhood as if it's something that you should be admired for. Now that sounds kind of maybe that sounds confusing, but I'll give you an example. Like that issue with transgenders going into the bathroom. You could go into the bathroom and use the bathroom 9 times out of 10, there'll be no problem. Maybe something to you, and it might hurt their feelings. But it's like they a lot of times people, I'm not picking on transgenders, it's just I'm using it as an example. A lot of times people use that victimhood status as if it's something you should maybe give them attention for. Maybe they put it on social media for likes, or for people to come by and say, "Oh, don't worry about that. You're a good person." It used to be where if something happened to you like that, you'd kind of brush yourself off, pull yourself up off the ground, go about your life and try to let it roll off your back. But I don't know when it happened, but this victimhood status as something that should be admired is...
I think it's people look at something like that and, for like you said, like no matter what it is, if you run into somebody who's bigoted against you, right? And it creates this this feeling of like I overcame this. I'm proud of who I am. This is me.
Well,
look out world.
Yeah,
right?
That's very admirable.
But I think that is a lot of times it's kind of tied into the victimhood, because transcendence involves a lesser than state, right? That you have to overcome to become greater than.
That makes sense.
I think a lot of times psychologically, folks like that, and social media definitely does not help with the dopamine regulation of it. But I think that a lot of times that they'll sort of latch on to that champion mentality. Well, they don't really have a lot that they can feel like a champion about, but they can feel like a champion about like those mean old rednecks who used to kick their ass back in the day.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or like whatever it may be. But I feel that, however, has sort of fostered this victimhood mentality where it's almost like kids with a scraped knee or a boo-boo, and it's just like Mom, Dad, I need something, come on!
And they come running.
Oh yeah, and they're
and once the kid understands that, they're just going to start the waterworks every time.
Right,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like folks that get addicted to virtue signaling.
Yeah,
where
that's right.
It's they're not necessarily. I know, bonkers. I agree. They're not necessarily like a motivated or kind-hearted person, but they're going to show to their tribe or whatever. You can't be up here. That they align. Namaste.
Right. And I think a lot of the accusations of bigotry, racism, misogyny, whatever buzzword you want to use, a lot of that, often they're not valid accusations. It's just the person who's levying the accusation wants attention on themselves. If I call you racist, it's as if I'm saying, look at me, I am not racist.
Yeah.
I live such a racism-free lifestyle that I can accuse you of it because, like I said, my lifestyle is so free of it.
Right.
A lot of this comes from, this is I'm going to segue into this topic here.
Sure.
It comes from cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is also it's political correctness. Are you aware of the origins of this political correctness, where it comes from?
Wasn't it like I thought it was from like Lenin or something like that.
Well, that's close. It's political correctness is our term for what is cultural Marxism. The terms are the same thing. Cultural Marxism is political correctness. This comes from the Frankfurt School of Social Research. It was located in Frankfurt, Germany. Now, this might turn into a long-winded explanation, so I'm going to try and run through it as fast as I can.
We got time, dude.
Okay, good.
No worries.
So, the Frankfurt School of Social Research was basically a think tank by intellectuals. These intellectuals were sociologists, they were psychologists, they were linguists, they were, just that type of intellectual. It was located in Frankfurt, Germany. Their sole purpose was to weaken Western culture and Western institutions, or destroy them completely. The way they do that is, well, if you look at who makes up the Frankfurt School, like I said, linguists, psychologists, what they did is they invented brand new words to attack Western civilization. So, for example, the word racism did not exist before the Frankfurt School dreamed it into existence. Once they dreamed it into existence, the word racism can be applied to anything Western. That means George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson, the founding fathers, people who created the Bill of Rights. They had no idea what racism was. But when the Frankfurt School created the word racism into existence, and I think this was around the 1920s, 1930s that this happened, they used that word racism to apply it to anything Western that existed before the concept of racism came into existence.
Yep, that makes total sense. I've said this on the show before, that like there are separate ideologies of racial superiority and people as property. Like those were completely separate and still are ideologies. And added to that, like the sins of the founding fathers for believing in people as property is not the same as the document that they created.
Right.
There's a big difference. Like from what I gather, there's a fair amount of celebrities, musicians, artists, creators that were on Epstein's flight log, right? One of them supposedly is like Matt Groening getting a foot massage from like an underage, like
I'm aware of that. I was a huge Simpsons fan the majority of my life. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point with that is the art, that if it's true that Groening is involved in some sort of like nefarious activity, and I'll just leave it at that, speculative. But if that is the case, that is not necessarily in the art that he has created. They are separate. The artist and the art are completely different. You know, like I mean, George W. Bush is a hell of a painter. Like I think he's a despicable human being, but like you look at like some of the watercolor portraits he does, it's like holy shit, George.
Yeah.
Like
where'd this come from?
Yeah. Like they're separate. You know, things are not so cut and dry.
Yeah, most people don't fit into an exact mold. People are complicated individuals.
But yeah, to the point with kind of with cultural Marxism and like the founding fathers and dismantling Western ideas, it then, if that becomes the focus of it, like a term like racism, right? Then you can apply it to all this stuff and say like, well, everything's invalid. Like my life is a lie. My life is corrupt. The system is corrupt. All of this. It's like these games that are being played have been being played for before America was even a country.
That's right.
Like they've been going at this for a long time, and they'll still be going at it after we're long dead and gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is a eternal struggle that's going, and we're just a small part of it. As this small moment of time that we occupy, after we're gone, it's just the struggle is going to continue.
Yeah. On a metaphysical point of view, I personally believe that Earth is eternal chaos. It always has been. It always will be. There is never going to be world peace on Earth, and because there's never going to be total destruction or war either. It's always in conflict, constantly. And it's we should make the best we can with it for the time being.
People should also recognize that a lot of progress comes from the conflict.
Yeah,
it really does.
It's the only way you grow as a person, right? Is to again, like to overcome something, to transcend something, to become a champion of it. So I mean that ripples out into a cultural and societal level as well, But yeah.
So what was I? Getting back to the Frankfurt School of Social Research. They created, and you've already touched on this, critical race theory. The Frankfurt School created a concept called critical theory. Okay, the concept of critical theory is very basic. It means you criticize. That's it. That's the whole concept. So if a politician says, we need a small tax, in order to pay for this, all you have to do for employing critical theory is say, no, that's a terrible idea. What about the people who are disenfranchised due to whatever? You just create, you use these buzzwords to attack the idea. Meanwhile, you're not offering any alternative explanation. You're just criticizing, okay? So the Frankfurt School created that concept of critical theory in order to attack all Western thought. And basically, they got away with a lot of this for a while, and then there was the rise of National Socialism. Hitler was elected chancellor, and the Frankfurt School of Social Research decided it was probably a good idea to, pull up tent, get out of town. Guess where they went?
Russia?
That's a good guess. But they went somewhere that has open border policy towards, foreign white people. At the time, America. America did not have open border policy towards non-white countries. It was very difficult as a non-white to immigrate to America back before the Civil Rights era.
Right.
So the Frankfurt School of Social Research decided to come to America instead of, staying in Frankfurt. And so they came to America. They went to New York specifically, and they created Columbia University. Columbia University is the Frankfurt School of Social Research. Modern politically correct thought all comes from Columbia University currently. Smaller universities like VSU, for example, if they want academic papers to kind of guide their curriculum, they're going to look to Columbia University. The problem is that university is inherently anti-American because it's anti-Western thought.
Right.
That's part of the problem that we're having here. Is this school is they're tearing people apart and pitting them against each other when we're all Americans. I mean, not all of us are Americans, but we're occupying this space where we need to just get along.
Right.
And
we have been for quite some time.
Right. And this friction that's currently happening between the races, between the cultures, between even people of the same race. It's deliberate, and it's been planned for quite some time. And it's very alarming once you realize what's going on. Most people don't realize this. Again, it goes back to what I was saying. They don't have time to investigate this. Mm-hmm. So if I explain this to somebody, how it's cultural Marxism as trying to tear down Western thought, most people, it's easier for them to just say, well, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Yeah. Shut down and go on with their life. You'll be a lot happier, probably, if you'll sleep better.
You'll definitely sleep better. But they're not wrong, because like it is literally people conspiring together to set this up. You know, like it's when you. The good thing about losing sleep over conspiracy theories is that you give your brain some much needed flex time, like some exercise. You know what I mean? And I've found a good phrase Eddie Bravo says is that I blue pill on the weekends. You know, because you have to be able to sort of like. Let me get away from.
So you could clock
this.
into work. Yeah, otherwise, let's be honest. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, I try to make sure that I work remotely now, but whenever I was like around people all the time, because I look weird enough already for like South Georgia, you know, the Viking face and the tattoos everywhere and the big booming voice and like all that stuff. So the last thing I want is for them to be like, oh, he's talking about weird shit too.
Yeah. Well, weird shit is interesting to talk about.
I do think so. I do. But so back to DC and like what happened. So I see that to me personally, I think this was a blunder, but I think that this was a chess move that was made where these DC cops were encouraging and let all these folks come up into the grounds of the Capitol and then into the Capitol itself, right?
I think that's a valid point. Let me ask before I touch on that.
Sure.
Who do you think planned that?
I think there's two logical plausibilities. There may be more, right? But I think one would be to say that if you had some fringe folks in, say, like the Back the Blue, like demographic, the Blue Lives Matter folk, Blue Lives, but if you had like cops, like loyalists that thought that they were going to usher in like this coup or something, and that the Q coup, we'll call it, I can see that as far as like them just sort of being like come on in, I don't think that is likely as the other plausibility, which I find is that whoever was in charge of the DC police knew this was going to happen and knew they can use it to create political theater. So just as the same way last summer, wherein you see these peaceful quote unquote protests where shit's burning and like businesses are being destroyed, and they're trying to tell you that like this is fine, this is like protests are nothing, and then they spin it around till you see what seems to be LARPing espionage in the Capitol, right? And them saying like this is terrible, this is like this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Both of them are bad things, and they got to a certain point because of other bad things that weren't involved with the groups themselves. You know what I mean? It's a boiling point that both of them reach. But I think that the more logical conclusion is that somebody in the DC police that is wanting to make sure that Trump's legacy be as tarnished as possible, lest he try to run again in 2024, to discredit his movement as radicals that are trying to take over the Capitol. So why not let them in and create a panic in the middle of the vote count, which is also going to anger a fair amount of the GOP senators as well. Because, I mean, think about it. If you're in those chambers, like you're an elected official, and it's the big day, right? And you're watching, what was Johnny Quest's bodyguard's name? It's Mike Pence, you know what I mean? But like he looks like Johnny Quest's pilot.
Okay, I've seen that. Okay, I've seen that cartoon. You're right. Okay,
but then like they have to stop everything. And be like we have to stop. The protesters are in the building. Like, what a fucking alarming thing to be thinking about. Like, you're in the chamber and you just heard we have to stop. The protesters are inside the building. Like, and some of these cats, you see them like have like zip ties and whatnot. So this is obviously not an organized event like a coup or anything like that. These are, again, like you're seeing fringe folk that were let inside by the police, and the police inside the Capitol security seem to have been completely underwhelmed and unaware that the situation outside was as bad as what it was.
Okay, let me tell you what I saw.
Sure.
Well, when I got there, first I got there early, and it was before the Trump rally started. The Trump rally was not at the Capitol.
Is that the mall?
Yeah, which is
in front of the monument. And
I think it was by the Thomas Jefferson Monument.
Okay.
The interesting thing is you could be standing at the rally and turn around, 180 degrees and be looking directly at the Capitol. So everybody was going to the rally, and the whole time I was I was, like I said earlier, I kind of go against the current. That's what I was doing. Everybody was walking to the rally. I was walking to the Capitol building. I was telling people, you don't need to be going there. You need to be going there. That's where everybody's having the vote. Go to the Capitol building. So I got there early. There were not many people there. Security was very lax. They had DC police, and that was it. And there were not a lot of DC police. There were maybe 2 to 4 of them per entrance. That's lax.
Incredibly.
Yeah.
Incredibly. They knew this was coming.
They did.
That's the thing. Like, and it's valid points from some progressive friends of mine that they'll show the comparison between like the BLM protests where they have like armed to the teeth and whatnot, and then the MAGA protest, and you see just a couple of boys in blue to handle thousands and thousands of people. But again, like I think that these are not indicative of whoever is in charge of the executive office. Who's in charge of that local police department? Who's in charge of the security at the Capitol? Right? Like they're the ones that are making these calls. They were responsible for preparing everything. So I think that, again, this was a chess move that they set up to like bait almost, to be like, let's have minimal police.
That absolutely makes sense. And I've heard a lot of right-wing leaning people, Republicans, they've mentioned that it was not MAGA people who were entering the building. They were Antifa who were leading the charge. That's possible.
The only Antifa-like tactic I saw, and I follow a fair amount of independent thinkers on social media that they'll post just users' cell phone footage and whatnot, was the folks trying to smash the windows outside with a hammer, and then they pulled them down. They're like, yo, that's Antifa.
Okay. Here's the thing with
that. That's the point being is like I don't see much validity to that argument from like diehard Trumpers where they're like, well, that was Antifa that infiltrated. It's like, I don't think so, man. Like, fringe exists on your side just as much as on the other.
I'm one of the biggest Trump supporters that you'll find until I'm certain that he's screwed us over, and I have suspicions. I cast a suspicious eye in his direction often. But having said that, the reality is we were angry. President Trump told us, be at this rally in Washington, D.C., January 6th. It's going to be wild. He told us to be there. He also told us the election is rigged and they're stealing it, okay? So we all go there expecting that, when the session starts, they were going to wheel out the evidence and start showing evidence of voter fraud. As soon as this starts, Mike Pence specifically shut it down. He said, we're not going to look at this. We're going to go ahead and proceed and certify a vote.
Yeah, he said something to the effect of he didn't think he had the power to suspend there's some court term, but it means to like put on hold.
Some kind of legalese that we don't understand.
Yeah,
I get it, man.
he didn't have to adjourn the session for this matter before getting to the next matter. That's what I heard his argument was.
So it would be easy for MAGA people to kind of blame it on left wing, or maybe they blame it on Antifa, or maybe they blame it on what are they called, the feds who, what is that called when feds infiltrate a group? What's that term? Do you know what that's term?
Like agent provocateurs.
There you go. Okay, it might have been agent provocateurs. Having said that, it's equally likely that we were just mad because I was mad. A lot of other people were very mad. So what do you expect? Yeah, we're going to, look, I'm not in favor of destroying property, but having said that, if they're going to try to socially shame me for being a part of it, it's not going to work. I'm very proud of what we did. Other than the, vandalism, I'm not in favor of that. Having said that, getting inside the Capitol building and, people, kind of just taking selfies and laughing about it. But to see all those politicians diving under the desks when there's no real threat, they just heard that there's, the protesters are inside the building and they dive under their desks. I'm proud. I am proud of that. It shows that they need to fear the populace who they've been screwing over for a very long time. 2020 was, pretty much entire years locked down. These politicians are government workers. They got paid the entire time. They gave us a $1,200 check and then a $600 one. For $1,800 for the entire year. Meanwhile, they are, they're not losing their paychecks.
No, they voted to give themselves a pay increase. I think about $50,000 each.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I was unaware of that.
I don't know if it passed or not, but that was one of the stipulations they had was to give each sitting member an increase of like $57,000.
It's an outrage. That is an outrage. And the left wing, I believe, should also be outraged about that as well. But they would never join us, the MAGA people. They would never join us to storm the Capitol.
I don't think at present. I think that I was talking with a friend of mine as well. I was like, if nothing else in the long term, I think this is going to show the populists on the right and the populists on the left that they do in fact have the same enemy, and that they can work together, but they have to choose to work together. Back in the day, there was a thing called the Fusion Party. The Fusion Party in a particular Wilmington, North Carolina, they wanted to outseat the Democrat oligarchs at the after the World War, right? So the Workers' Party, the local Labor Party, the Black Republicans, and the white Libertarians all got together and formed the Fusion Party with the goal of to first have to take back power and then to be diplomatic with each group and to like work for all three of their communities to be prosperous. It actually worked. It ended up working. However, much like we saw with the president's one term, there was a coup that went into effect immediately after it worked, and they started plotting the DNC to oust the Wilmington government because it was successful. You had black businesses that were thriving. You had black bankers. You had America's only independent daily newspaper that was owned by a black man. It was called the Daily Record, if I'm not mistaken. Independent news, right? And they essentially, in 1898, had a coup. They had an army of white nationalists called the Red Shirts that they hired that formed their own white Declaration of Independence. They rumored...
When you say they hired, who?
The DNC.
Okay.
Hired this group of white nationalists leading up to the election to run their campaigns, to convince everyone that the DNC was actually the party of true America is for white people, and you have to stand together. Like, so again, it's a variable, right, that they just tie into it. But it ended up working. The day of the election, they prevented a lot of people from going to vote because they would have armed guards that were standing up. They would come to white people's homes that were registered not with their party and force them to cast their vote early for the DNC.
This is insane. I've never heard of this.
Yeah, the Wilmington Insurrection of 1898.
I'm going to have to read about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, on election day, of course, the Democrats then won, right? So they took back the city. The day after is when the true coup d'etat happened. So they went and they murdered all of the members of the Fusion Party, including the black Republicans and white Libertarians that helped organize it. They issued a statement in the newspaper giving the owner of the Daily Record 24 hours to vacate the city because his property was now being seized by the city of Wilmington. And if they would be bringing out a lynch mob for him, they put this in the paper.
This is, I'm amazed. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, just 122 years ago, not that long ago at all. And they went into the streets then, the red shirts, and started murdering black families and business owners in the black community. They were rumored to be about 800 people that they murdered on that day, on election day.
Oh my God.
Burned down businesses. They then started adding in all of these rules within the city, right? That you had to be a loyal white person in order to get like proper bank loans for mortgages. They would have rules where it's like, well, we can give you the bank loan, but you have to be able to pay the principal up front. It's like, so I have to pay all of the money that I want to loan from you up front? It's like, yeah, sorry, rules are rules.
Well, that's not a loan.
yeah, but it was a way to completely ransack the town and cripple it. You didn't see black or even Republican representation again in Wilmington for 90 years.
Jeez.
It's how effective this coup was. They then renamed a lot of the parks and streets and statues after some of the red shirts that were involved, and changed some of their history books to show that actually what the DNC did actually helped the black community in the long run in Wilmington.
Well, that's a really that's communist playbook right there.
Yeah.
Use the underclass as a weapon against...
Would you like a glass of water?
Oh, no, thank you. You use the underclass basically as a weapon to overthrow whoever's in power. And then you tear down memorials, tear down statues, so that they can erect new ones.
Yeah, you change history.
They can erect new ones of communist heroes, and this the crazy thing is people in America who are young people who lean towards communist ideology, they really should look into it a little further, because when communists take power, specifically in Europe, this has happened over and over and over again. As soon as they take power, first thing they do is they start killing the best and brightest.
Yeah.
That includes you,
Yeah.
even if you're a communist, because you know too much. You know too much about how
you can be a threat, and you don't have competition in that type of authoritarian regime. It's dangerous, quote unquote, right?
Right.
So that's how you get rid of that. You show people that, like, I'm actually willing to go further than you are. Line them up against the wall.
And they it ended up being that they killed their best and brightest and most talented people, because the communist ideology says, basically success is a result of your unfair privilege, and your success comes at the oppression of others.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you are rich, if you are successful, that means you are an oppressor, and they have to kill you and take your money and redistribute it amongst the
Who they choose.
amongst the rabble.
Yeah.
Sorry to use that word, but
But but I mean, it creates class warfare in a dichotomic value, which is absolutely terrifying, because then even if all of us are incredibly wealthy, right? We're not wealthy.
you're not. You're average. You're absolutely average.
Yeah, so it creates, you look at, in the 19th century, people as property was the form of slavery, right? In the 20th century, the Federal Reserve Act was the form of slavery.
That's right.
So the 21st century, we're moving into whatever the Great Reset is going to bring, right? And like you said, they've been planning this for years. Like, since we were like little kids, this has been in the works, since like the Clinton eras, it's been going on. It's not stopping. It's not gonna stop. However, you want to be able to make sure that nobody wants to be told what to do, and everybody wants to be able to continue to survive into the 21st century. And the sad and scary thing is, not all of us are going to.
Absolutely not. Someone's going. Some groups are going to have to go. And it's not a good thing, but
that's why I think also, like, they're encouraging all this turmoil in really big cities, because of this notion of, it ties into the ideological principles of the Great Reset. There's too many people. The 20th century wasn't enough. We didn't kill enough people in the 20th century. There's too many people.
Right.
Because if we get rid of some people, then we'll be better off. That's a fucking poisonous way to look at, like, solving a problem. Is like, life is in jeopardy. Therefore, we need to minimize life.
Right. Oh well, man. So is that what you think the driving force behind the Great Reset is? It's just overpopulation?
I mean, it's one of them, right? Because it's like climate change is tied in with it as well. And while these may be heretical points of view that I'm saying, like, climate change is real. It happens every year.
That's right.
The climate changes. Now,
It's the one constant. Climate always changes.
Yeah. Earth is dynamic like that. Our solar system is as well. But we're coming out of a grand solar maximum and entering into a grand solar minimum. So what happens on this is, solar radiation increases, right? Well, when solar radiation increases, the temperature goes up. There's a lag, however, and whenever the temperature goes up, it takes a long time to heat all of the water that is on our planet, So there's a few years lag behind. Well, what happens with that is whenever the temperature increases, well, the CO2 increases as well. So, like, the great humanitarian, quote unquote, Al Gore is correct that there is a correlation. However, it's backwards, right? You have more CO2, more greenhouse gas effect whenever you have higher temperature, like on the planets.
And that's due to the solar cycle?
Solar radiation.
You're saying?
So we were after World War II. We had a low period of sunspot activity, yet our man-made carbon footprint started increasing greatly for like 30 years, right, from that post-economic boom that we had after World War II. But because the solar radiation was so low, so it creates a sort of odd thing where it's like, well, why is the CO2 higher in this 30-year period and not affecting the temperature here? So, but what it does match is it matches the solar radiation. So whenever the solar radiation started increasing in the mid-20th century, they started having these news outlets talk about a great global cooling was on the way, ironically enough, and that we should be careful of this new ice age and we should be cautious about it.
Right.
Well, what happens? Well, the planet gets incredibly warmer. So now we're exiting the grand solar maximum and coming into a grand solar minimum. But again, there's a lag. So while the sunspot activity is starting to decrease, the temperature is still increased for a couple of years, but it's going to start coming down as well. So we're going to see likely in like 60 to 80 years, it's going to get really cold.
Oh, man.
That,
I do not like cold weather. But that makes sense. I've never really. I'm not familiar with solar cycles.
I'm an idiot genius, so I just interpret everything as a layman. I'm just a little more, I guess, articulate than the layman.
It makes sense. I've been saying that the global warming is due to the fact that we were coming out of an ice age, which is true.
Mm-hmm. The little ice age, I think, was 300 years ago or so.
Right, and it
a blip on the cosmic calendar.
The last bit of it was still during somewhat modern recorded history. Mm-hmm. There's paintings of like New York back in the 1800s, and people were just ice skating on.
Yeah, like the River Thames.
Yeah.
Froze over in England. Like I think in the 1700s, like the whole river. It's like that's pretty fucking
completely
cold.
Froze over. Yeah. So I have been saying for years that the global warming was just a result. It's just a product of coming out of the ice age. But I think you just added an interesting element there. Are you saying we came out of the ice age due to the solar cycles?
Yeah, it always goes. It's like a sine wave, right, of solar activity. Now, granted, it has its little peaks and valleys.
That makes sense.
But yeah, so what it seems to be on like a 400-year cycle, more or less. That like great cold period, then 200 years later, great warm period. 200 years later, you're back to a cold period. Like it's a sine wave of solar activity. So these notions of like the Great Reset tying in things with like climate change. It's like, well, okay, so what are we talking about specifically when we say that? We want to talk about pollution, right? That should be what we're talking about. Water pollution, like throwing garbage in the water, is not. You don't treat or manage that problem the same way you would with like air pollution.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so like when you say like, oh, we need to, think about like what we're doing with our carbon footprint or whatnot. It's like, hey, how about this? Flint, Michigan still has dirty fucking water. Mm-hmm. How about we make sure that our water is clean? That seems to be like the big thing. You have certain fisheries that are literally scraping coral reef. Like to like
the industrial fishing is doing terrible damage to our, and it should not be allowed. What a mess.
Yeah, or even like Garbage Island, which is supposedly like the size of Texas, and you think about like oh, it's this giant landmass. Like no, it's this water that's infested with all this plastic. The actual huge hunk of like garbage is probably about as big as like a really large boat.
Yeah.
But like you think about like how that ripples out, like all of these organisms can't live in this water because it's essentially liquid plastic.
I tell you, every time it rains in California and Mexico, Arizona areas, it adds to that garbage island because in Los Angeles there's a large population of homeless, and
As large as the city of Valdosta.
that's right.
That's fucking wild.
That is
60,000+ people.
Outrage.
Yeah.
That is an outrage, is what it is. Many of them are mentally ill, and the fact that we're just allowing them to be discarded on the streets like that is disgusting. That we do that to our own people. But I'm getting off the subject. What I was saying is, every time it rains, those channels, they're called
Like the aqueducts?
yes, the aqueducts and the what are they called? They're basically like ditches where water goes through them. And anyway, homeless people camp there, and they tend to leave stuff behind, sleeping bags. Every time it rains, the water goes through those channels and dumps that all into the Pacific.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. We need to do something about the homeless population in LA. That's again, this is to pick on the left some more. California has been under leftist rule for so long, and these people who are egalitarians, they have no problem stepping over a homeless person to go buy their expensive latte in California.
Yeah.
So your ideology doesn't align with your lifestyle there. So, but
It's okay. They tweeted a picture about how
Right.
compassionate they are.
right, exactly, and it absolves them.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Funny how those principles and scruples sort of just go by the wayside whenever you're confronted with a harsh reality, which should be a lot. I personally have I've never lived on the streets, but I have been without a home before, and you should be very humbled just that you're able to find shelter. What I think this does, I think it normalizes people living in squalor while others are living in these nice castles, right? Like Los Angeles has essentially become a kingdom or a fiefdom, whatever,
Absolutely, it's amazing. So back to this the Great Reset.
Yes.
You think the motivating factor is the solar cycles and
No, I think that's something that they're not talking about, right? Because there's I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to essentially again replace the current upper echelons with folks they want to be in the upper echelons. The rest of us are still down here at the bottom.
right?
But they want to minimize competition from an external source, right?
Oh.
So a great reset of reimagining currency, capitalism, labor force, all of these things is going to be very beneficial to having that come to fruition, right? So again, I think that's something to give an example, like the Paris Climate Accord, right? So a lot of folks, they were up in arms with like Trump got us out of the Paris Climate Accord, and my first question was, I don't know what that is. What is that? Because
It's an outrage because the news told me it's an outrage.
Orange Man did something.
Yeah.
Orange Man bad. But the Paris Climate Accord, what it does, it sets up this system where you use tax credits, money from the taxpayers, to buy carbon credits to allow you to pollute. So it actually doesn't reduce any pollution. In fact, China and India, the two most offensive polluters
That's right.
on the planet, could actually double their carbon footprint and their pollution footprint by just buying more credits. They were allowed to do so under the Paris Climate Accord.
And what is a carbon credit? It's an abstract.
It's currency, right? So folks like Al Gore and the Bushes and all these other folks that we've seen from Reagan era till Trump era politics in America have all been ready for these carbon credits to kick in. Like all this stuff was set up, right, for them to be able to cash in. Why? Well, because what it seems like is that this global warming aspect of climate change is going to fall by the wayside in a few decades, right? So you need to strike while the iron's hot. There's a famous motivational speaker who's an asshole billionaire named Dan Pena, who talks about the absurdity of like the ocean levels rising. He's like, if that were the case, he's like, you would have no billionaires buying beachfront property.
Right.
All these folks buying islands in the Caribbean. You know, like you wouldn't have this if they knew that a global catastrophe like that was coming. So it doesn't make sense for it. What does make sense is them trying to profit off of it, because it's a small window that they have, right? They only have like a generation or two to be able to convince of this before the data is not going to fit their argument anymore. You have to capitalize on this. So the Paris Climate Accord was a way to capitalize on it while giving the illusion of caring about the environment.
And so they can continue to jet set around, but it's okay because they have carbon credits.
Yeah. Rules for thee, not for me.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I think that also some of these bigger name people, which goes back to something you said earlier, like Bill Gates and Fauci, folks that are talking about like, well, we need to lock down until 2022. I think these men are compromised. Now, I don't have any data or evidence to support this. This is just my opinion, my perspective. But it makes sense that these men that are incredibly powerful, especially Bill Gates, right, incredibly powerful, you would want to have someone compromise them, because if you have them compromised, blackmailed in a certain way, right? If you have dirt on them, then you can get some of the most powerful people in the world to do whatever you want. And I don't think all of these billionaires are, all the billionaires and trillionaires. No, I don't think they're a homogenous group either. I think that, say, someone like, Trump doesn't have the same allegiances that, say, like Bill Gates had, you know what I mean, or the Clintons had. They're a part of this same network, but Trump's allegiances seem to be with the Israeli banking cartel, not with the Roman banking cartels. You know what I mean? Like all these different things, and definitely not with the Chinese banking cartels.
Right.
But that makes more sense to me than like Bill Gates really cares about people, or even the more conspiratorial aspect of like Bill Gates wants to euthanize the planet.
Yeah, he wants to put the mark of the beast in the vaccine and everybody. Yeah, I get you. That's a little out there. I think it's, you're right. It's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
But concerning the Great Reset, I didn't consider the solar cycles and the climate change. I hadn't considered any of that. To me, the motivating factor behind the Great Reset is probably the fiat currency. Global fiat currency is set to collapse. I mean, globally, and in America especially.
Right.
Inflation has been out of control, absolutely out of control, ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank, which was 13 was it?
I think so. It was during the Woodrow administration.
And so the thing about the fiat currency is this is an ancient scam. It's ancient. The first bankers, they didn't know about it, but they came to be aware of it. If you're a villager who goes in mine, tries to collect minerals from mines, so you have maybe copper and silver and some gold, and you move from village to village. that it weighs a lot to carry that from village to village. Bankers figured out they can create this central bank, and people can deposit their gold there, and they can give you a piece of paper that says you have a certain amount of gold and minerals, and you can carry that instead of all that weight.
Right.
They soon discovered that these pieces of paper that say you have this certain amount, people became more interested in having that piece of paper than they were in these minerals. And this took place over probably decades, if not centuries.
Right.
So once people are interested in that paper, that's what the bankers do, is they give you the paper and they keep the minerals and gold. That paper is essentially worthless.
Yeah.
But everyone thinks that it has value. The US dollar only has value because people put their faith in that value.
Mm-hmm. It's a god to certain people, like even in particular, like some Hindu sects, that they'll refer to like money as like it's a lesser god. Like it provides everything for you, like in this realm, and like
it makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem with it is when you have paper as a currency, and you can just print paper. Not anyone, but when it's in the hands of those who create currency, they can just print as much paper as they want. Mm-hmm. If they print as many dollars as they want, the value of that dollar goes down. It's a hidden tax. That's what inflation is.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So, a politician might say, they might propose a 25% income tax. Nobody's going to like that. So they, propose maybe 5%. People are okay with that. But then, due to inflation, by the time that same politician gets out of office, the purchasing value of that dollar might have dropped to 50 cents.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's one of the more alarming things I've seen just in the past year is the buying power, the purchasing power of the dollar. We've had, I think, like 66%, so like, or close to that, so like 2/3 essentially of all of the money that is in circulation right now was created, quote unquote, this year. And the transfer of wealth went up. It went up. Nothing came down. They shut down all these businesses, right? Yet the stimulus packages went to the same corporations that were allowed to stay open, and like that like all these special, like the Kennedy Center was one where on the first stimulus they fought for, like, no, I think it was like $25 million. It may have been more than that for the Kennedy Center. They're like, no, we have to have this for our employees and all this. And so of course they're like, all right.
That's what it was for, the employees?
Well, no, that's what they said it was for. After they got approved for it and it got passed, the first stimulus, they laid off a formidable amount of their employees.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So like they've created all this wealth, right? And then most of it still stayed in this sort of upper echelon of everything. So whenever the purchasing power goes down, right, they're still going to be okay because, again, they have this reserve of everything. So, like, it is interesting, though, like, talking about the fiat currency and, like, for instance, what was it, Fort Knox, I think is where all the gold is, like, holed up, where, like, now you're not even allowed to, like have, like, gold bars or anything.
That's right, citizens. Yeah, that's insane. That's a good indicator that something's very wrong.
Yeah.
That's so. The fiat currency, the scam that it is, it's always destined to fail eventually. As time goes on, the whatever your currency is under a fiat system, the currency is going to devalue as time goes on. The problem is people catch on to this. So I feel like, in a lot of ways, that's what the Great Reset is heading towards. They can collapse the economies of these countries and blame it on COVID or the quarantine and say, oh, it's due to this, we had a pandemic. Well, maybe it's partially due to that, but it's mostly due to our bullshit currency that they've been, and what a mess. So I think they're trying to collapse all of that and usher in a new global currency, which you could argue that we have a global currency due to
petrodollar.
Well, just petrodollar, and plus each country has credit cards. You can use a credit card,
that's true,
or wherever. But I really think that that's what they're doing. They're going to collapse the currencies and then restart it so that no one detects the fiat currency is what it is, and that's bullshit.
Yeah,
it's a scam. It's an ancient scam. In fact, the fall of the the Russian Empire, when they ushered in the Bolsheviks, the communism. Before I tell this story, I'm not certain how factual it is. This might be one of those conspiracy theories, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway because it's just a fascinating story. Basically, the elder Rothschild at the time sent an agent to the Tsar of Russia, pretty much trying to convince the Tsar to install this fiat currency in Russia. The Tsar was actually aware of the scam due to, just people surrounding him. The scam has been around forever. So
right.
He detected the scam, and he sent that Rothschild agent packing. And basically, the Rothschild decided that he had to go. The Tsar of Russia had to go. They created Bolshevism, the communists of Russia. Basically, they stormed the castle, murdered the Tsar and his beautiful family, murdered them, and then installed communism and started murdering the populace of that country.
Yeah. And they had a civil war like right after that. The White Army, I think, was the other populist army, and they lost, but
and it just spread throughout all these countries, Ukraine and Poland and all of that. And it's basically, if the whole story is true, it's all due to the scam of fiat currency, which is a great problem that we're having today. And that's, to me, that's what the motivating factor of the Great Reset is. Could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But and it could also just be one element of it. But I think that it factors in highly.
I would agree with that. I definitely think that, like most things, there's not just one thing going on. There's a lot of fingers in play on the board.
Yeah.
But I think different societies are going to be doing things differently. Like what they have, like the 10 geographic zones, pretty much split up is like how the globalist network works. So like America runs America, and then the northwestern hemisphere, right? India runs India, Arabia runs Arabia, Australia runs Oceania, China runs the eastern seaboard of the world. The EU controls Europe. The African Union controls Africa. Like they've been planning all this stuff for a while. What is kind of I don't know about frightening is as strong a term I'll use, but irksome, I guess, if nothing else, is the United Nations, right? This, like, we have them set up in our own country, and we have already seen, like, people and politicians try to call on the UN to send in the troops to remove government officials.
That's treason.
Yes.
And there's one penalty for treason.
This is true. This came out yesterday morning, I believe. It was a New York Times article that talked about it would have been Saturday, right? So Nancy Pelosi supposedly, according to the Pentagon, came to them and said, I would prefer if you ignored any commands that come from Trump for the next 10 days or 11 days.
Why? He has no power. Apparently, he's voted out of office. What are they worried about him doing in the next...
The Pentagon responded with, that would be a military coup if we attempted that.
Whew. Yeah. And the military's not going to follow Pelosi.
No. Just because you've got like top brass that are just like, we need war. Like that's most of the military really enjoys Donald Trump. Like most of them do, because he sort of brought back a lot of things that has sort of been undermined from them after this 20-year war in the Middle East.
I'll tell you what, the man started no new wars.
No, well, he's been doing these peace deals and trying to essentially pull troops out, but there was an article not too long ago where these military leaders lied to him and like his cabinet members about how many troops were still in Syria. Apparently, he thought there was like only like 200 or 2,000 troops, and apparently there's a lot more troops than that. So like all of these things that are set up. The irony is that again, like someone like Pelosi, who's an actress, right? Mitch McConnell is also an actress, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
They're screaming that like, oh gosh, it's a coup attempt. It's a coup attempt. No, it's not. It's a protest that got a little out of control. Like what you effectively have done is try to have a coup attempt.
Right.
Like by going to the Pentagon and saying, ignore the president. He has less than 2 weeks left, lady. Like, now, personally, my biggest gripe with everything that happened in D.C. was the, again, I do not support social media banning the president of the United States whatsoever, no matter who the president is. But after the rally, he puts out that video where he's like, instead of doing the thing that his officials were probably telling him, like, hey, you might want to calm this down because it's starting to look really bad. He starts off by saying, like, we all know it was bullshit, a fraudulent election, but go home in peace. It's like, people aren't going to go home in peace when you kind of, like, start off your message with saying, like, but just a reminder, like, we should be angry and pissed off.
Well, which is it? If it was stolen, if it was a rigged election, we should not go home. We should overthrow these people. Which is it, Mr. Trump?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, consider this. The person behind the storming of the Capitol might have been President Trump. Not in the sense that you're thinking he just kind of instigated, inflamed people's tensions and it got out of control. He might have been using his supporters to start, an insurrection act, which allows him to do certain things. I'm not sure if that's the case, but...
I think if that were the case, I think he should have used the Insurrection Act the minute some of these governors were using anti-constitutional lockdown measures. That's what I personally think would have happened. I think he didn't because he felt it would have jeopardized his chance with the election, which it would have. It totally would have. But again, I think they already had all of these measures in place to sort of prevent that from happening.
Well, it's very interesting. The next 2 weeks, just the next week is going to be very interesting. It's going to be a wild ride.
Well, I do hope it'll be for the better in the long run. I'm not sure it will be. One thing I do encourage people to do is try to move someplace more remote. Like, if you can, like, get out of a city if you can. Get some distance between you and your local law enforcement if you can. Because what I do see happening in 2021 is more of 2020. I see more lockdowns happening. I see more folks feeling disenfranchised and angry. What I hope doesn't happen is, just civil war. I do think that something like a divorce is not impossible nor out of the question as far as like what's a peaceful solution to this. Maybe something does need to happen to where it was like before the Civil War, where the states have their own autonomy and they can decide to run things how they want, and the federal government has no say-so in it. Well,
what you're proposing there is the only way we get there is through a bloody revolution.
It could be.
I really don't see. I mean, I could be wrong, but I really don't see that happening any other way, unless you have an idea that I'm not.
The one thing that happened in 2020 I found was interesting. There was a case that was ruled on this fellow. I believe he's dead now, but was in Oklahoma in the 90s, and he used a defense that he actually could not be tried against the state of Oklahoma due to where he lived, because there was a treaty from 1892 with the, I think it's the Creek tribe, or the Chalk Creek tribe, but had with the federal government that after assisting them in some sort of military operation, that they would be awarded this part of Oklahoma. It's essentially half of the state now, like the eastern half of the state would be their own state. Well,
this was recently in the news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Supreme Court just ruled on this guy's argument from the 90s in 2020, and they ruled that he's correct, that the eastern half of Oklahoma is actually not Oklahoma, that it is still within the United States, but that it is under the law of the Creek tribe. And so they're now going to have to look at every single person from, this includes like the Tulsa area and all of like the Panhandle and the eastern part of Oklahoma, any prisoners that were tried against the state of Oklahoma.
God, they have to go through all those court
because they're now null and void. They have to let everybody out. However, it also changes tax laws as well.
Oh my God, what a mess.
So like on autonomous land zones, right? Like for instance, Indian casinos, their tax laws are different on that land because of how they're zoned, right? So in effect, it creates this argument where you start looking at, okay, let's take a look back at like how these states were kind of set up in the Reconstruction era and like what was going on after the Civil War. And then you start seeing that a lot of these states, we should probably have 2 or 3 times the amount of states that we actually have, and they should all be much smaller. And I find that, like, if we have that as a solution, like, we need to shrink the states. Like California, there's no reason why California, like, should be that large. It's and again, like you said,
native Californians will tell you the same thing.
Oh yeah, well, and that it's been leftist for like the only time I think it was red was during the Reagan years. I don't think it's been red since then. You know what I mean?
Well, the interesting thing is if you look at the county the county results, the entire state is red except for the major cities.
Yeah. And
the major cities vastly outnumber the rest of the state in terms of population. Mm-hmm. So when the counties that hold, Los Angeles County, for example, when they vote blue, it completely takes away from the rest of the state, which votes red, just due to population density. It's very interesting. That California is that's a case study right there.
Yeah. Well, and they've been trying to split up their own state for a while now. Like 5 years ago, they had a measure on their state ballot where they were proposing to split the state up into 3, where you would have Lower California, which would be, Southern California, I think, up to Sacramento. And then you had California, which would be from like Sacramento up to the San Francisco Bay Area. And then from Oakland on up, you had Northern California.
State of Jefferson. You know that?
No.
You've never heard of the state of Jefferson?
Uh-uh.
Yeah, they were trying to push for a portion of California to actually be the state of Jefferson. And it's I want to say that it's Northern California, but it might be that I'm not certain exactly where it is. I want to say it's near the Oregon area, but they want to become the state of Jefferson and completely divorce themselves from California. I mean, more power to you.
I think that counties should be able to leave their state. Like, I do think that. I think that they should be able to group together with other counties if they wish and leave the state and form their own state. Now, like, again, I'm not sure what the legal process is to do that, but I think that stuff like that is a solution that you could do and avoid, like, a second civil war. I don't see that. Again, that's a more desired outcome. So, like, things that are more desirable take longer, right? Like, it's much easier to destroy something than it is to build something. Mm-hmm. But I think that is the way of the future, and that's the only way you're going to have local autonomy back, right? Which that has come under fire with 2020 being the year of authoritarianism, and which I am not about in the slightest whatsoever.
Well, that's what the extremists have in common. That whole I've heard about that horseshoe theory. I'm not exactly on board with that. I think they are completely opposed in ideology. The thing they do have in common is that they are authoritarian. Under a communist regime, you are going to do as the communists say.
Yeah.
Under a fascist regime, you're the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's what they have in common. It's just a struggle between which authoritarian regime we're going to choose to be part of.
Right. That's where the sycophancy kicks in, right? Because then you have these folks that are just loyal due to being loyal, like for the sake of it. It's you have a good example of sort of weird paradox would be somebody like Linda Sarsour. Like, Linda Sarsour is a champion of Sharia law, which is one of the most far-right authoritarian regimes that exist. They think that the Bible thumpers in the South are like the really closed-minded people. No, see what the religious right does in the Middle East. No matter what holy book they're using, go ahead and see how religion takes control of the law over there. And she's a champion of, like, the left, and, like,
that's right.
Bernie Sanders is like my good friend Linda Sarsour here. She's here to speak for women's rights. It's like, her testimony is worth 2/3 of yours according to her ideological principles.
Do you understand why that is? That she would be a champion of the left?
Well, again, if we're talking about authoritarianism and a way to undermine Western democracy and Western values, Western ideology is antithetical towards Wahhabism and Daesh, some of the more fundamental aspects of Islam, right? So, in particular, in the Saudi Peninsula, you see gross violations of human rights.
That's right.
All over the place.
Including against homosexuals, just for being homosexual.
Yeah.
And they throw them off buildings.
Yeah.
And American liberals are not pursuing action against them. They're just...
Well, because they feel it would make them bigoted to critique someone of a different ethnic or cultural or religious value that they're familiar with.
Which all goes back to critical theory and the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
Their goal is to dismantle Western thought and Western culture. The fact that the hard-nosed Islamists are kind of right-wing in their thinking.
Well, it's right-wing because the church is in charge of the law. You
mean the Islamic? What do you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like if it doesn't necessarily matter if they're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or satanic, for all that matter, they're fundamentalists because the church essentially controls the law. The church perverts religion. It doesn't preserve it. So do you think it's going to help the law, or do you think it's going to usher in authoritarianism? It seems more of the latter of the two, is just from a historical context, is what happens whenever the church gets control of the courthouse. Right. There's a separation of church and state for a reason, because it goes two ways. you want to keep the court out of the church, and you want to keep the church out of the court, you know. But we tend here in the West to think it's just like, well, the church has no place,
Right.
like in our courtroom. It's like, well, yeah, but the courtroom has no place coming into the church as well.
Yeah,
You know,
that's a valid point.
So why are people not allowed to go to these churches or whatnot? You know, so the religious right does not have control over the law here in America.
Right.
They do have it in Sharia law, because Sharia law is derivative of holy text itself. Like it's indicative upon itself to be religious and right wing because the law commands it.
I see. That makes sense.
But again, like I think it's fundamentalism. So like Wahhabis and Daesh, these are sects of Islam that they throw like gay people off of the roofs of buildings. You know, they torture women. They condone pedophilia in certain circles because in holy text it talks about these things. Same way you had back in the day with Christian slavers that would cite from like the Old Testament as far as like, well, it says here how to even beat your slave. It's like, yeah, maybe you should try what they call cafeteria religion, where it's like, I'm going to take the stuff Jesus said because he seems like a cool dude, and I'm going to take some of the Buddha and Krishna stuff and sort of like form a harmonious life around that. You don't have that with fundamentalism, right?
Right.
So in like the Middle East and places outside of Western society, you kind of see how that plays out. Here in America, though, it's now the left that is the church. It's the secular church of atheism.
Well, yeah, atheism. I was going to say it's a church. It's a religion of lunatic egalitarianism. Lunatic egalitarianism, because they propose that everyone is equal in ability and everything about you is equal, except maybe the configuration of, the genitalia between man and woman. Besides that, everyone is completely equal, and that is insane. Any normal, rational thinking person can see that it's not true. And me saying this is not it's not coming from hate. It's not coming from a position of supremacy, because I don't view myself as superior to anyone. I mean, some people maybe, but
On an individual level,
right.
not on a collective level.
Exactly. So this insane cult of egalitarianism just it tells you things that anyone can see are plainly not true. The problem is the people who support these ideas, they refuse to acknowledge that it's not true, because, like you said, it makes them feel good. It makes them, when they say something like, there's only one race, the human race, gives them a little dopamine shot, like you said. It makes them look as if they're very altruistic. But anyone can see that there's differences between the races. That is not hateful. I mean, members of each race will tell you, like, yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
That's why, in the Olympics, we have a certain country will continue to win a certain sport year after year. Like, I think like the fastest runners are Ethiopian. Okay, they're not just black people. They're not just African. They're from a specific region of Africa,
Right.
Ethiopia. And consistently, they run faster than everyone else in the Olympics. That means there is a difference there. And the differences should not be, differences should be celebrated, in my opinion. But again, that's just me.
Well, again, I think it ties back into what we were talking about earlier with ideological subversion and cultural Marxism, where you want to minimize competition, right? Unless it's who you want to be competing. So, because what you don't want to be is usurped by someone that you didn't expect to win, right? So, with the Trump winning the election 2016, like, they're not going to let that happen again. Like, they're not going to they're going to put in safeguards to make sure that, okay, well, a billionaire is not going to be able to go rogue and start his own political party again. That is what is happening, and I do think that is good because it's going to separate the GOP rhinos and these oligarchs that have nothing to do with. That's
Stab it.
it's breaking news. As fuck, what are we talking about?
Oh, so sorry.
That's all good.
I can't do anything about it. Look at my phone. I can't silence it. This is what happened in D.C. It's cracked. I can't see. Yep. So anyway,
but yeah, it's it's not gonna happen again, right? That like he has created. I do think it's good that it's created this split on the right because again, it's not the right anymore, right? The left hasn't quite had their fracture that they need to. I think Sanders could have if he would have ran independent in 2016. Which would have been really good for the country, right? He still would have lost, but it would have shown populists to be like, hey, fuck the oligarchs. We don't need them. Yeah. Like, we can form something on our own. But instead, he sided with the Clintons, the one of the most despicable, in my opinion, crime families that has ever existed in American politics.
Now, why do you suppose Bernie decided to take that route?
I think it was because he got offered status and money. That's what I think it was. I think that he wanted to possibly have something for his family for after he's gone because he's getting up in age, right? So I think that they convinced him because he's soft-hearted like that to be like Bernie, come on, man. Think about it. If you go up against all of this, it's going to ruin your career. Your family's going to get blacklisted. Nobody's going to be able to hire your grandkids anywhere. Like, all this stuff, you know what I mean? And instead he was like, but what we can do is we can use you to bring in the youth vote and we can work together to try to bring some of your ideas in. I think he bowed.
Makes him feel good, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing how empathy works with manipulating people in politics.
And there's
more so than fear, actually. Empathy, I think it's the most manipulative tool.
Absolutely. I'm glad you see that. As the media bosses who exploit that in many cases. I mean, not in many cases. That's basically the majority of our problems.
Yeah.
These media bosses who know they control the minds of the masses, and they have no loyalty to our country. They have no loyalty to any even a moral sense. They just have loyalty to their own advancement.
Yeah.
And to keeping competition out, keeping everybody away from, if everyone's pursuing equality instead of their own personal excellence, then they will never have any competition for.
No, that's one of the big problems I have with the idea of equity, as far as, well, we want to make sure that everybody gets the same results. That is a disastrous way to try to solve a problem. Slavery is equitable. Every slave gets treated with the same amount of a dehumanization as everybody else. You know what I mean? Like, it's again, it creates this strong dichotomy of the classes between all of us and the very few that get to dictate everything, right? And
unelected officials.
Yeah. All of these, they get tossed around like what's the Illuminati? Well, that's just a term for a council that was used hundreds of years ago. So what they are essentially, it's a board of CEOs, right? It's a room of folks that are dictating how the world is going to go, so that they can stay in that position.
If you want to look at a specific group, I would point to the Council of Foreign Relations.
Yes.
They are major players. If basically individuals who are part of that are what you would call the Illuminati, they're part of that group. They might be a lower level, but that's basically.
Well, I think it ties back into the Club of Rome as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. The Roman. Apparently we've been ruled over by I wasn't aware of this. I was raised Catholic. I'm born Catholic. Went to Catholic school and everything.
Same.
Okay, really?
Yeah, Catholic school for 7 years.
Okay. So someone I just recently discovered that the Pope is basically a Caesar. Yeah. That's who he is.
Yeah. He's declared a Hierophant according to Jesuit ideology. The Hierophant is the ruler of the world, the voice of God, in effect. They also have their other popes. They have the Black Pope, which is the leader of the Jesuit, and then they have the Gray Pope, which I believe is the leader of the coin purse, if you were. But these three popes, you have the public pope, and then you have the hierarchical pope, the Black Pope, right, and then the Gray Pope. But all of these they're essentially the Hierophants, that they are the supreme rulers of the world.
Yeah. So when as the Roman Empire collapsed, as it began to collapse, and they saw the rise of Christianity, they basically said, let's merge the Roman Empire with Christianity.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the pagan holidays and celebrations, they just merged them with Christian holidays.
Yeah, Saturnalia became Christmas.
Right. And so atheists will point to that as saying, that means that religion and Christianity specifically are bullshit. That might be a valid point, but I don't think that tells the whole story.
Well, no, because Christianity itself evolved from older religions as well.
From paganism?
Yeah. So, and sun worship, like all this old world stuff just permeated into the Renaissance. And then from the Renaissance, the Roman Empire was then sort of like, we're going to remix everything. We're going to change art around the planet. We're going to change maps. We're going to change books. We're going to infiltrate the realms of science, the secular realm, and the realm of theology as well. So again, Big Bang cosmology, that came from a priest. That came from a Vatican scientist.
Did it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know the name?
Not off the top of my head.
No, I'm going to look into that later. That's interesting.
Yeah, like they funded, like you said, like they're like, well, Christianity's on the rise. Let's merge it with the Roman Empire. Well, whenever the Copernican revolution happened, and then from science, and you start having like the beginnings of atheism start to sort of like build up. Well, again, they're like, how can we take a part of this movement? Well, let's go ahead and get involved now. So they started their own religion in atheism as well, which we would call now scientism.
Right.
And Big Bang cosmology comes from the church. Even aspects of evolutionary biology was funded from Vatican money. And it's
interesting.
Yeah, because you think like, well, why would they do something to undermine their own organization? It's like, well, they're not undermining their own organization. What they're doing is they're taking charge of the critics of their organization and leading them how they want to go.
Wow, that makes sense.
Yeah, history tends to repeat itself.
Absolutely, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Wow. So, oh man, so I forgot what we were. I was talking about. Kind of went around the world a couple of times there, didn't we?
That'll happen, man. Like, as I'll start talking, and like I'll listen to other people talking, and I'll just be like yes, yes, like I know these ideas, and like just start like connecting all these dots and everything.
Yeah, that's why I have sympathy for Alex Jones. He tries to explain something, and then he gets off on a tangent and explains 20 things and just spurts out. I get it. I understand. You can't explain one element without having all these.
I operate at like 3% of the level that Alex Jones' brain operates on.
All you got to do is buy his vitamins.
My buddy Judd sent me something earlier. Somebody did a research and found out that, was it like Gwyneth Paltrow's like Pussy Dust or something like that? It's made up of the same stuff that Super Male Vitality from Alex Jones is made up of. Like it has the same active ingredients.
Wow. She just changed one thing about it.
Which is essentially what he did. Like he, took like some of these like I guess stuff that you would get over the counter, right? And then you look to see like, well, what's the main active ingredient in these supplements? You get the main active ingredient, and then you can add harmless filler material to it, and then you can get intellectual property rights for your new product.
And all you gotta do is market it.
Yeah.
There you go.
But there is something to be said about like Alex Jones as far as like I have not seen someone who has been correct on so many things be demonized for being incorrect on like 4 or 5 things.
Like the which is that school shooting?
The Sandy Hook thing.
Yeah, that's what he's mostly criticized for.
Yeah. And like people still like use that, and they're like he denied Sandy Hook happened. It's like, yeah, he also went back later and said he was wrong about it, that he was mistaken. He was given false data on it. He's had to pay money for it. He's been blacklisted.
And it's admirable anytime someone can admit that they were wrong about something.
Right. But like that's like he and honestly the Q conspiracy theory were correct about Epstein though. Like they were the ones that were talking about it. And so
did you dive deep into the whole Q thing?
I did a few years ago, and because like that's how like I knew about like Epstein before like he didn't kill himself, but like that was one of the things where I was just like, holy shit, the Q people got it right.
Right.
Like I was like he did get arrested. Like it's not just like this fucking like hearsay or whatnot. I think that's also at around the same moment. Was that August of 2019? That was around the same time that all of a sudden all of the crazy Q stuff started popping off.
Yeah.
Like this, what I would call PSYOP stuff, where it's
where it's
like
not,
Trump is helping get kids out of tunnels underground and whatnot. I was like, that doesn't sound like the QAnon stuff.
Insane.
Yeah.
That is insane.
But then like more stuff started piling up where it's like, they're gonna shut down all communications, and they're gonna have Tom Hanks live talking on camera because he's like
before they put a hood over him and hang him or whatever.
Then they're gonna have Clinton and Obama and all of them standing trial for treason, just like Julian Assange leaked out those emails, said that they had done treasonous stuff. It's like, this doesn't seem sensical to me, fellas. Like, well, now if you look at the data points, that seems more sensible, right?
Now I'm having a good time criticizing this whole thing with you, but I'm not gonna lie, I was snookered. they got me on quite a few things. I was reading it, I was like, my God, sharing it with people, like, read what's going to happen. And it's a good example. It's a kind of like a crash course learning, like, if someone tells you something that you want to believe, you're going to attach yourself to it.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be more apt to believe what they say.
I very much wanted to believe a lot of it, so it took me in. I believed a lot of it. The interesting thing is, a lot of it is valid.
Very true.
A lot of it is true, and a lot of it, just because of that, it leads me to believe that whoever's behind it is informed about behind the scenes thing, activity. Right. That doesn't mean that everything's true. It just means it's a psychological, like you said, it's an operation.
Right.
Psychological warfare in a way.
I think it is a way to, and it does have inverse effects, but it's a way to get the folks that have the most firepower in the country, right, to be passive.
Yeah, that's right, and sit at home. It's the perfect boomer recipe for sports fans. Like, hey, you're in on it. You're in on the secret. You get to sit at home and watch it unfold on TV. It's like,
trust the plan.
Yeah, trust the plan. 2 more weeks. Trust the plan. You're going to see this happen. Just don't take any action. Okay, now, Man, look, I enjoy making fun of Q and the whole conspiracy theory thing, but just to bring it back to the left, let's bring up some of the left's conspiracy theories. Namely, that Donald Trump was installed by the Russians. Okay? Yeah. I'm not saying it's entirely untrue. It might be true. I personally don't believe it. But when the time came for them to show the evidence, namely, Adam Schiff was tasked with showing the evidence at his impeachment trial, which they spent $50 million of our taxpayer dollars making this impeachment trial. When it came time for Adam Schiff to enter into the evidence, what the impeachable offense was, which was a phone call, if you remember correctly. It was a phone call from Donald Trump. He took the actual phone call, and because they printed it out, they made it available. I think the Pentagon did. Mm-hmm. Anyone could look up the
transcript.
There you go. You could look up the transcript, see exactly what he said. Adam Schiff was tasked with entering that into the evidence. When you enter something into evidence at a court, you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He reads the transcript and he adds his own lines.
Yeah.
Okay? And then he finishes, adding his own lines to make it sound incriminating. So, okay, now we have a discrepancy here. Either Schiff is lying or the Pentagon is covering it up for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Which is
And somehow Schiff, with his intel, quote unquote, was able to get this extra transcript.
Right. So they asked him about it. The news media, they asked him, Adam Schiff, about it. So, this doesn't add up with the official transcript. Well, who's lying here? He says, I'm not lying. I was paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, he went on later, I believe, to say that he was being in a parodic manner, like he was making a parody of it. It's like, I don't think that when you're entering it into the congressional record, that's the time for you to be hyperbolic or be a comedian of sorts.
That is absolutely not the time. That is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do.
100% agree.
It's insane. So
I think he's a despicable man.
He is. I think... I don't want to go into it. I'll say some pretty horrible things.
There are some things that are tied in with the Q theory, though, that it kind of makes sense why he was leading this charge to be like no, we have to impeach him. We have to impeach him now. We have to do it now. And I think kind of without saying it aloud, but some of the implications in the Q theory that tied in with him directly.
Yeah.
His actions seem to reflect that there was more truth to the matter than he would like the public to know. You know what I mean? So like he like a few other people, you have to demonstrate loyalty, right? Yeah. Like the sycophancy again. So if he demonstrates he's an orange man bad person to his political affiliates, then they're likely going to have his back whenever a fallout potentially happens. That doesn't mean they will, but it's like an insurance policy, to use one of their conspiracy terms.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, the Russiagate thing, like there was a clip a few years ago from one of the heads of CNN saying that we actually don't have anything, but Zucker is telling us that we need to not report on the news.
Right, I think that was the Project Veritas.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, sure was.
All right. So yeah, it's right there for anyone to. Anyone who wants to, put aside their biases and look into it and under a factual lenses, you can see that it was a scam. The whole Russiagate thing was a scam. And unless it wasn't and they knew more. But the time for them to present it was at his impeachment trial.
Right.
And they absolutely failed at that.
Well, and when that didn't work, a few weeks later, COVID happened.
No, that's a good point. I did not even think about that. That's, valid point.
Yeah, just a few weeks later.
And then...
in my opinion, they had all this stuff set up from the get-go. From Inauguration Day, they had everything lined up because, I think it was Michael Malice who said that, Trump was not the river to flood out like the system. He was the dam, but the dam is broken. And so like all he could do was stall this authoritarian lockdown for a little bit to try to set some things right before they do it.
Interesting.
And I think, because if you look at some of the executive orders that he has passed, they're very progressive. They're incredibly progressive. And, like the First Step Act, the Second Chance Act, the Save Our Seas Act.
Executive order on policing.
Yeah.
That's
animal cruelty being felonious, like the preservation of national parks. When they're like, oh, he's just going to root up, like all the environment.
Right, because he's an evil capitalist who just wants to plunder the earth.
He's a real estate gangster from New York. That's a different kind of criminal than like what we've been accustomed to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when people are like, well, I think he's a despicable human being. It's like, okay, I don't have necessarily a logical counter for that because again, like he's came up through New York real estate to become a billionaire. You don't get that way by being a hospitable human being.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Being nice to everybody.
Yeah, but you're not talking about that. You're talking about the politics, right? The policies. That's where politic comes from. It comes from policy, right? So, like him having an executive order where if you don't, as a public university, support the rights of your faculty and students or all to have freedom of speech, your First Amendment, you lose public funding. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's a good thing to have. The bad things that I think people don't look at as far as like what he did are things that increase the police and surveillance state.
Yeah.
And again, that's bringing us into the 21st century. These are things that, again, like he was a dam to sort of stop the flood. So as a way to, I guess, make sure that, say, a foreign entity like Russia or China doesn't dictate how our authoritarian policies will be had in the 21st century, he becomes a part of it and works with the intelligence communities to set it up to be like, well, we can't stop this, sir. It's happening. Whether you do anything about it or not, it's happening. Would you like to do some stuff about it to prolong the benefit of the population? I think those were the moves to make. So again, because everything with history, you have to deal with politics, you have to deal with everything that has historically happened already to you, right? So whenever Trump comes in, he's like, they left me a mess. It was a disaster. He's not wrong.
Right.
He's not wrong, but every president that walks in
can say that. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. But what you were talking about, the communist countries don't dictate our policies.
Right, for this authoritarian Great Reset.
Now, the interesting thing is they do in a way because many of our corporations are headed by communists. For example, I'll point to Reddit. I don't know who the current CEO is right now because I got off Reddit years ago. But they had, the CEO was a lady named Ellen Pao. She's Asian. I want to say she's Chinese, but I'm not certain. She's East Asian. And she is a communist. She's entitled to be a communist, I suppose. But when you're CEO of a corporation that is active in the United States, that means if you employ if you employ Americans, the corporate policy that those Americans are following is basically indoctrinating them into communism.
Yeah.
Because it's just corporate policy.
Yeah.
But it's dictated by this communist CEO.
Well, you want to be able to keep your job, right?
Yeah.
Like I do, you know what
That's
I mean?
right.
So like if my bosses are like, hey, we're going to start doing this, we're trying to change the culture of the workforce, I'll be like, all right, what do you need me to do?
Yep.
Like, what do you need me to do? They're not violating any of my scruples, but over time, it can change your outlook, you know?
What they need you to do is keep your mouth shut and just do as a worker bee should do.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They don't want someone who can think freely. And, man, and the thing about it is probably 90% of the population doesn't really think freely. They're capable of it, but they...
well, the lie's comfortable, right?
That's true.
The truth is the discomfort. So it's a lot... It's like people that comply with all the stuff that's going on. It's like, well, why are they all complying? Well, because it's easier. A lot of folks don't want any trouble. You know, they just want to live their life and quote unquote get back to normal, which, shocker, is not happening. It's not going to happen. But these are the same folks that, you know, they'll, for instance, like I do not willingly give my money to Disney. I have personal problems with them.
As do I.
And so, like, I don't have a Disney Plus account. The Hulu account that I have is just tied to Spotify. I don't pay for it or anything, but it is there.
Are they a subsidiary?
Disney owns Hulu. But my personal reasons with that are ABC and Disney. You know, they're owned. Disney owns ABC. They had knowledge of the Epstein stuff years ago. And Disney was even running cruises to Little St. James Island.
That's right, they were.
So, like, I personally, I protest with my dollar. Other than, you know, having the podcast and, you know, just letting people speak. But I'm not giving my money to Disney. I'm not going to have a Disney Plus account. Aside from ignoring what I consider the evils about it, it kind of just pacifies me in a certain way that, like, almost like a drug does. You know, like those flashing colors and the storyline that it's actually the same story told over and over again magnificently every time. Like, Disney makes phenomenal.
Some kind of tragedy happens early in the story. It traumatizes the little children.
A parent dies early on. That's normally a trope in a lot of Disney films.
It's a formula.
It's a way to sort of break a child, right? To give them trauma and then coax them and build them back up. It's from a Dave Chappelle stand-up where he's talking about a pimp named Iceberg, I think his name is, and he talks about how he gets his hoes to be loyal to him. He says like, oh, well, that's easy. First, you beat that bitch within an inch of her life, then you run her a hot bath, give her some champagne and a lot of pills. She'll be so thankful that you're the one that fixed her, she'll forget all about that you were the one that broke her in the first place.
Jesus, that's some psychology there. That's on a deep level that a pimp shouldn't... That's street psychology.
Yeah. But if you think about like that, as far as like on a micro level, how a Disney film would react, that is a similar way, like for a child, right? That like you break them like with this fear, this trauma, in a short little while, and you get them emotionally dependent and weak, and then you're like, well, hey, let's sing a song about it. Let's all come together.
Yeah, okay. And then you feel better all of a sudden, and
that's interesting. And then once you have them feeling better, then you can get them to do your will, right? So then a conflict and climax happens, right? So it's like, well, you're broken down, your spirits are low, let's build you back up. Now that you're back up, this is your enemy.
Oh, wow. Now, consider this. That same formula might be being used in just real life. Traumatic events. Young people see traumatic events, and then, like you say, they say, here's your enemy.
Yeah.
To be specific about it, the boomer generation, as kids, they watched Kennedy have his head blown off on TV. They saw it. That's very traumatizing to them. And they grew up with that trauma. that psychological, the weight of it in their minds. And then what was I think the next thing for my generation was the Challenger explosion. They got, when I was a little kid, they got all of us into the cafeteria. This was the same across the country. Schools across the country. Everybody knew who Krista McAuliffe was. Everybody knew about the Challenger. They got us into the lunchrooms. They got on a TV, and we saw in real time the Challenger explode, and those people died. That's traumatizing to them.
Yeah, then you have 9/11.
Next generation gets 9/11. They see it on TV, people falling to their deaths. Okay, these are more or less 20-year increments, give or take.
Yeah.
So it's been 20 years since 9/11. We're due. We're due for something. Unless I'm just looking too much into it, and it's just...
Well, I think the traumatic events as far as viewing them has kind of already happened. So like last summer, with Minneapolis, some of these other cities catching fire, and then the Kyle and Kenosha debacle that happens, and you see things that are really scary to people that are locked down in their house and they're angry and disenfranchised anyway. And then you see what happened recently with the DC stuff, where you flip it to the other side of the coin. We're hey, all those crazy white people that are there in DC, look, they've stormed the Capitol. Look at them. This feller's got horns on. Aren't you afraid? You know what I mean? But it's theater that it's used just the way a movie company or a storyteller would use something in order to get you suckling at the teat of these authoritarian puppet masters.
It seems like such a specific formula that there's probably no way it could just be coincidental. It can't be, just happen on its own. There's a design behind this. But on the other hand, it could just equally be society is in chaos. And people have a hard time interacting with people, and it just comes to a head after a certain time. It's very interesting to think about. I tend to lean towards all of this is by design. Like I said, it could equally just be a societal thing, but I think there's a shadowy group behind all of this, and they're pitting people against each other, and most people can see that. It's probably just due to they want to maintain their own power. But then there's other elements about it, maybe the elites are all atheistic and their god is science in a way. So maybe their only motive is to employ the scientific method. So when you see something happen, let's say 9/11 happened, and we think there's somebody behind it, you kind of try to figure out what their goal is. They're bringing down the towers to install this. But really, the motive might be just to see what happens. It's a scientific method. You take you take a focus group and you add stimulus and you see what happens. That it could just be that simple. They want to see what happens. Very scary.
A little bit. It's kind of the people start using throwing around well, they believe in science and all this. It's well, yeah, the Nazis believed in science as well, and they were just injecting people with stuff to see what happens. The science is not altruistic by itself. In fact, science by definition is indifferent completely. So while it could be possible that it is one of these things where it's just let's see what happens. I think more or less it would be let's see what happens to see if we can get to point C. We're on point A, but we want from point B to lead to point C. You know what I mean? So I think that I think most of this as well is by design. Like I don't, much like a lot of things, I don't believe in happenstance forming so many coincidences.
Now, if you were part of a group that had absolute or just incredible power, now I could tell, but just from this conversation, that you have a set of morals and you're pretty devoted to those. But let's say you were part of some kind of group that held power. Would you be willing to give up that power? Because I kind of tend to think that most people who are part of a group that has power, if there was no conspiracy to keep power, they would create one. Yeah. I think that's human nature.
I think so too. I'm not apt to give up my power. You know, like I'm not exactly a cuck by any standards of the word. You know what I mean? Like I'm not about that at all. About the submissiveness of it. So if I were in charge, no. Like I'll be honest. No, I would not likely want nor would give up power. You know what I mean? Because
that's because you
can create the world in your image in that
way. And you think your viewpoint is and I mean, everybody pretty much sees it this way. You think your viewpoint is correct, and you think if everybody can just adapt your viewpoint, then they'll be correct too. Yeah. It's part of human nature.
But yeah, and once you get power to do that, what you don't want to do is to relinquish that power because maybe it's because of control issues. It may also just be because you don't want to fail. You know what I mean? It could just be like no, I can make this work. I can make it work, guys. Just let me keep working at this a little bit longer, and we'll find out a way to make it happen. But what's the cliche that absolute power corrupts absolutely?
That's right.
So I think that I would not be so apt.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this before we wrap up. Where do you think we're headed, right? And where would you like to see the world being in, say, 10 years from now?
Oh, well, firstly, where we're headed is, I firmly believe we're headed for a war. Maybe, I don't know who the factions would be. I definitely see a war coming with Iran. I don't know if that would be the correct move. I tend to, this leads to your second question, I tend to think America should be isolationist, because I agree with that. That's what we were for the first 150 years, and it worked pretty well. You know, we had a civil war, but in that civil war, people don't realize foreign actors played a large part in that. People don't realize that, but
British banking cartel was funneling a lot of money to the Confederacy.
They wanted their colonies back. I mean, they funded. Britain funded the creation of America, and then what did we do? We said no taxation without representation. Yeah. Get off our backs, and they're just like, well, we loaned you a lot of money to get started, and we're just like, no.
That's an argument I had made. Quick tangent about well, how could the founding fathers, they were all these evil men? It's like no, because not all the founding fathers believed in people as property. But what happens is you only had a quarter of the people that were here that were willing to fight the British. Out of that quarter of people, these folks realized they had to ally themselves temporarily with folks they deemed as criminals in order to defeat a bigger criminal organization. All the while, they then, after found the American independence, couldn't root out this internal problem for another 100 years or so. And it ended up leading to the Civil War. Because then they're like, all right, now that we've kind of got autonomy, this bit of autonomy is a little disturbing because they don't have people. You have people as property. These people are not property. They're people. They're entitled to the same rights as the slave owners.
And there was alternative ways to get out of that system. You know, if you're a slave owner with a few slaves, basically you become an employer with employees, and the way you do that is basically, you know, through government subsidies to, you know, make that transition.
Right.
Of course, not every slave is going to want to be an employee of your, you know, so you have the option. I think they should have given the option for you to get off the plantation and go wherever.
Yeah.
But a large element of the Civil War was that the North was industrial, South was agricultural, and, you know.
Well, the oligarchs, whenever couldn't have people as property anymore, they just moved out of the South and went north to the industrial zones and started re-strategizing from there. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, the South was sort of left in destitution. So, like in the Reconstruction era, back to the Wilmington stuff, that's when you start seeing autonomy fully rise up out of the South. You know, you start seeing like black businesses, all the places where the Democrats had control, they no longer had control. You know, the Confederacy had fractured completely. So because you had all of these folks that were disenfranchised, they had to figure out life on their own. They had to pick up themselves by the bootstraps, as the expression goes.
Yeah, where they never had to do that before. It never really, because they were slaves, they had no, they might have had no, it never occurred to them that they might be freed one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, it's hard to free yourself if you don't even know you're a slave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then in the North, the industrial North, the employees of a corporation or whatever, what have you, they might have been, the conditions might have been little better than slavery, but they were told that they are free and they're employees, so they're okay with it. You know, it's very interesting the way this country's progressed.
Yeah. So where do you see in 10 years?
10 years.
What would you like to see?
I would like to see a collapse of the fiat system, go back to a you know, not necessarily gold-backed,
Resource-backed
yeah,
economy.
Exactly. And I would like to see a non-interventionism with the rest of the world. Basically, American politicians are elected to oversee America. It is not your job to strengthen other countries.
Yeah.
And
well, we need those gender studies in Pakistan. Like, those are really, really important. So thank God that they worked that into the second stimulus.
You know, oh my God, that's insane. That's just insane to think about.
Billions and billions of dollars went overseas when people aren't even allowed to work. So, yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that would be ideal to see a bit of isolationism and, you know, we'll say flexibility with currency. You know what I mean? I do think that's something like Bitcoin is sort of offering that. You now have a lot of major Wall Street firms that are dumping millions and millions of dollars into Bitcoin. That, to me, tells me something is on the horizon. You can invest, while Bitcoin itself, I think, is like $40K for one coin right now.
Yeah,
you don't have to buy a whole coin. Like, I've invested, I think, like 0.02% into Bitcoin. It's like $100 or so. But like, still, like, put something back, you know, just in case. Like, if it was 10 years ago and you would have bought like 10 Bitcoins for when they were $1 a piece, you now have like $400,000.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that this is a bit of a gold rush, and who knows to say when it's going to spike, and then they may do something to be like, well, you can't buy Bitcoin anymore.
Well, all they have to do is cut the power. How are you going to get your Bitcoins out of your virtual wallet if you have no power, you have no internet?
Yeah.
That's why I have no interest in Bitcoin.
I think that's what they'll do with something like UBI down the road as well, because if you get out of line with the, say, ideological principles of whoever's in charge, and they can just be like, well,
they can penalize you.
Yeah, they'll just be like, well, your social credit score has dropped, so you can't access your money until you bring your social score up. Why don't you try virtue signaling online a little bit, boost it up a little bit? I think that's where we're headed to.
Yeah, if you're living on a farm producing your own food, that's not a problem. So what you said earlier about people getting away from the cities, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. James sat down and talked to me for about 2 hours and 40-some minutes.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, man.
It was a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you so much for sharing your time.
I hope to do it again.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I appreciate your perspective, as unique as it is. I always enjoy having individuals come on the show. So, is there anything that we can promote for you for the listeners?
Not at this time. I'm working on this. What I want to do is create political music videos. It's like a merging of political videos and just music for the younger generation. It wouldn't be for parents, people our age.
Right.
It'd be kind of something like, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, Rage Against the Machine, came out, and everybody at the time, me and my friends, we all decided we wanted to be edgy, political, and we didn't realize what the politics of Rage Against the Machine was. And
a little paradoxical of a communist group in a capitalist market.
Right. But I guess my point with that is it was effective. It got kids into politics, even if they didn't quite understand what they were supporting.
Right.
So I sort of want to do something for the right wing in a way of making music, videos for younger people. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. And
well, Rage was really good for that, because while I don't agree with like Zach De La Rocha's politics now, like he was extremely influential for me for having American cynicism, which I think every American should absolutely have. And that was a good launching pad for...
it's been what, like 20 so close to 20 years, something like that. What, 93 is when it came out,
yeah,
right?
So 27 years.
So,
yeah.
Wow. But the thing about it is it's so effective that if you put on that first album, I could spout off all the lyrics with it.
Fuck yeah, man.
So it's kind of like I see how effective that was, and I kind of want to use that to, get my viewpoints out there. But I just don't. I don't know where the future is headed. We're obviously in a conflict with ideologies that oppose each other. One of those is going to come out on top. And the other ideology might be full of people who are, unemployable in the future just because of their views. And I might be one of those people. Currently, I am one of those people. A lot of corporations, if they found out my views, that as rational as I think they have been, they just don't want to be associated with that. So in the future, one ideology is going to be, unemployable, or
for certain markets, for sure.
Yeah.
Again, to what we were talking about earlier, like they've sort of further separated these demographics, and so they're like, okay, well, these marketing tactics aren't going to work over here, but we do have marketing tactics that'll work with this demographic as well. So I think that, there is a threat as far as employment, and you're right that like there's going to be a crackdown on conservatives and Republicans and libertarians from speaking their mind. I don't know if that will be a permanent thing, but I do think that corporations are going to be like, look, there's too much of a risk assessment of bring in folks with something that is considered quote unquote fringe ideologies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have mattered if it were one ideology or the other, but once you start saying that, like, well, your thoughts aren't really aligned with on your personal life with who we want in our workforce. It's like, well, shouldn't you keep those separate anyway? Like,
yeah,
you know?
Or it could be that the future just holds. They see this conflict between the ideologies as profitable, especially for the media. Who, we used to have just the nightly news. Now we have 24 hours of news. You could put it on Fox or CNN. It's all day long. They have to fill those hours with something. So in a lot of ways, I feel like the conflict is being pushed by the media, who's just making money off it.
Yeah.
So it might be that the next 10 years just follows that pattern. And if it does, I don't want it to, but if it does, I'm just going to try and profit, make my own money, and, just care for my family with it.
Yeah.
That's basically... I think that's what everybody wants, is just, make your money and be left alone so you can focus on your family.
Yeah.
I hope that the future it's easier to do that. It's certainly not easy to do that right now.
Right.
All of the business during the lockdown went to Amazon and Walmart. Everyone else was at home, just, if you needed something, you had to go to Walmart or order it from Amazon. So currently, we're in trouble. We have a lot of work to do to pull ourselves out of this. I don't know who's going to pull us out of it. I don't know which party, or if a party can do that. So I'm very apprehensive about the future. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I think the world's going to keep ticking regardless, right? I do think that this authoritarianism is not done by a long shot. I think it's going to accelerate. I think that the trick is you have to be able to adapt or drown, right? I'm not trying to drown by any stretch of the imagination. This same guy from earlier I mentioned, Dan Pena, he also... he talks about that if you really want to change the world, you have to find a way to become filthy rich. Once you become rich, then you can change the world. And he uses like Elon Musk as a good example. He's like, he became incredibly wealthy and then was like, okay, now I want to start enterprises that are things that I think will be for the betterment of mankind in the long run. Mm-hmm. He talks about you can't do it while you're still climbing your way up. You have to get up to the top, and then you can make real change.
Right.
So.
It was like Scarface said. First you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the woman. There you go. Same thing. It's the street philosophy.
Oh, yeah. Well, shit. Well, thanks again, James.
Thank you for having me. I got to pee so bad.
Yep, me too.
That's how we'll wrap it up.
Oh, yeah. Later, y'all.